Hi there. Thanks for downloading, listening to, and watching the Lean Into Artcast, the show where a couple of visual storytellers get together and think about different topics that naturally come up when you take on this endeavor of communicating visually. We think hard about this stuff, so you will too. My name is Jerzy Drozd. I am a cartoonist and a teaching artist, and the other host is...
Hi, I am Rob Stenzinger, a user experience designer, and I also design and make video games.
Designing and making video games and making comics, using images to convey information. How you doing, Rob? It's been a week.
Yeah, it's been a week, and yeah, I love that. You know, we're here again to. I know it's like we pull at topics that that many of them we have direct experience with in a few different layers and ways, and sometimes. I mean, sometimes it's like, oh, you'll bring in topics. Sometimes I bring in topics, whatever. And, and we just like to unbox stuff that we've experienced firsthand with it, but then get that extra, why and how and like, I don't know, like we used to call it on the ground as a section and then 10,000 feet up. But you could also call it practice and theory. That's just the pattern that we
how and why.
Oh, yeah. And that's, I don't know. I think I like doing that. Pretty sure there's some data in the world. 7 years of doing this. Yeah.
Yeah, and at least like 150 episodes of us doing it that way, right? I'm estimating.
That's true. The format has evolved. And
yeah.
And we've got branching alternate formats too.
Well, I mean, any thing that we make should be, I think, iterated upon, right? We both are pretty strong believers in that idea.
Well, yeah, I guess that it's pretty natural for me to, if I, sometimes to an extreme, like one can look at some of my webcomic work and say that, wow, you designed this character differently on the next page or whatever. And I'm like, well, I thought about it more. And
on the job training. Okay, so speaking of which, we often pull topics that are fairly fresh from our recent experience, and as it happens,
ripped from the headlines of our journals.
Hey, actually, yes, they are ripped from the headlines of our journals. This year has been, I've had a lot of travel this year. And because of the release of this book called Science Comics Rockets, Defying Gravity, from First Second Books, did a little bit of a book tour where we were traveling around Michigan to different schools, libraries, bookstores, but then also hitting up some conventions. Let's see, what did I do this year? Oh, I should have written down all the different shows I've done this year, but the most recent one was the Massachusetts Independent Comics Expo, also known as MICE, which is October 20th and 21st in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Just got back a couple days ago. Also did Terrificon this year, the Carytown Book Festival, Nerd Camp.
I was wondering if there was a historic record, because I know that upcoming events typically are at, you have a list at sciencecomicsrockets.com. But it looks like you clean that list up as they come to pass.
Yeah. I don't have that list anymore. It's just an HTML gadget on the site that I just strip stuff off and add stuff on from.
Okay.
But I mean, I could also look at my Google Calendar to see like when I had flights scheduled, right?
But there's been a lot of touring. That's safe to say. And both you and Ann doing a variety of things too. I mean, you're presenting the book and tabling, and you're doing like school visits and like there's various flavors of appearances, it would seem, you're doing in support of this project.
And I should say, I mean, it's more than what I'm used to doing, right? This is by no means some of my cartooning friends seems like they're always on the road. Like Lucy Bellwood seems to be constantly traveling, but it's more than what I'm used to. And so conventioning and presenting at festivals is kind of on my mind lately. It's something I've had to think about a lot. And so it occurred to us that, hey, maybe it'd be worth revisiting our thoughts on conventioning in 2018. I was reminded of the fact that, and we're going to hit the music and get to the topic in a second. Ages ago, this would be, well, again, like over 7 years ago, during the Days of the Art and Story podcast, we did an episode on conventioning where we actually put together a spreadsheet. I was trying to find that spreadsheet that actually calculated what all your costs would be to go to a convention. I'm sure there's better resources out there now. But we were kind of talking about like choosing carefully what kind of conventions you go to, because on average, you're going to spend at least $1,000 to go to do an appearance at a convention. And that came in terms of hotel cost, potential flight cost, food cost, printing materials, paying for your table rental, display materials, and so on. You can see how that would add up really, really fast, right? So our thoughts were back then was like, try, if you're starting out, like hit local places, try to keep it as close to home as possible to keep your costs down, try to find craft shows that are like, so you could be the unique thing there if you're a cartoonist. And then, as you build more of an audience, then maybe hit some of those bigger shows. Anyway, I was reminded of like that this is a topic that we have come around to again and again over the years, and now maybe it's time to take a fresh look, using my recent experience at MICE as a lens to, begin the investigation. How does that sound to you?
I think it's a fantastic idea. I just
Oh, you just looked up a bunch of episodes that we talked about conventioning in. Holy cow!
Yeah, we've chatted about this a few times. Because, I mean, there's a few, you think of, conventioning is one way to look at it as a functional aspect of your creative business is, there's a term from user experience and service design called a touch point, right? There's a point, that's a place where you meet your audience, your audience somehow what you do is available to them, right? So like you could think of that in terms of an experience or a user interface, and how do you present what you present? And we've even chatted with Ryan Estrada a couple times on this too. And then of course we've done reflections on conventions such as A2CAF and Kids Read Comics as well, and then even debating the pros and cons of cons. So quite a few times we've visited this. I mean, at least like 5, 6. We can put some of those links in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll put those links in the show notes. I feel like some of these are like rebroadcast candidates, like Doing It Wrong with Ryan Estrada. I remember that one. That was a good one. And that's a long time ago. That is not in the feed anymore.
Oh, no. Yeah, exactly. I mean, anything that's like over 100 episodes in the past, that's gone. It's you have to go to the website to listen to it. And it's that's just because of our current hosting service. That's just how they function. That's not by our design.
We didn't do it, but it's got the neat benefit in that it lets us pull those rebroadcasts out and go, hey, value add. Okay, time to hit some music.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right, here we go. Transferring over to topic. Not necessarily on the ground, but the how. Reflecting on MICE, Massachusetts Independent Comics Expo in Cambridge, Massachusetts. My first time at the show, and I'd heard good things about it. This is their 9th year. And it is, as the name suggests, it's not a big trade show. It's a smaller, independent, indie comics focused event. It's on the campus. Where is that? Where is that place? University Hall, Lesley University. And in like the actual convention, or what would you call it, like flea market, artist alley kind of setup is on 3 different floors. There's like an atrium. Well, actually, no, it's on 2 floors. But there's like this atrium area. There's a couple of rooms, like separate rooms with tables set up, and then there was like this lower level where we were, where all the kids' comics were set up in the building. So it wasn't one big giant, like the concrete block trade show kind of setup, right? It was much more closed, very close quarters.
I know you've got a variety of different experiences that that you'll explore on this, but I'm curious about what. So, what was that like? I mean, it sounds like there's maybe a variety of flows of traffic, maybe, or was it just kind of all of it was packed, or what was
It
that
was all
like?
packed. It was all packed, but there were some areas that were tighter than others because in the atrium area, like these were like hallways like that were traditionally used for like foot traffic between classrooms, and now you have a 2 foot deep table and another foot taken up by an artist behind it. So now the traffic in those areas becomes pretty tight. It reminded me a lot. You haven't been to TCAF, right? The Toronto Comic Arts Festival.
No,
Um,
nope,
that one,
haven't had the
is
honor.
it's a gigantic show. And it takes place in the library, but they've taken over like 3 floors of the library. There's like 400 tables or something. No, 400 artists, I think, a table at the show. So it's literally like 10 times the size of a 2CAF, right? Now imagine that. And like there are times where the traffic is so dense that it's like I got to take a break if I'm walking the floor, But I mean, it's a good energy because I think having done shows like New York Comic Con, Wizard World Chicago, Mid Ohio Con, the more traditional in the sense of like superheroes, movies, pop culture, science fiction, those kinds of shows where it's like you're going to have, say, well, this is what Terrificon. Terrificon was like this a lot. Like you had Ralph Macchio there, you had pro wrestlers there, and you had cartoonists, and you had people selling toys. Like here's like for some reason at Terrificon this year, the hot thing was custom Lego figures. Like there were people with like banks and banks of custom what is that show? Winter's Coming, Game of Thrones,
Game of
right?
Thrones, yeah.
Game of Thrones figures, stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, we made like the entire cast of Dexter out of Lego figures. So you have like this huge cross section of interests all happening at those events, and as a result of that, you get audiences that are there for very different reasons, right? There are people who are there because they want to show off their cool costume. There are people there because they want to collect some specific toys or get some new custom figures of some sort. You got people who want to get Ralph Macchio's autograph, right? You get people who are there for comics, but like it's a very diverse crowd in the sense of what their intent is. At a show like Mice, everybody's there to discover comics because it is an independent comic show. There are no TV actors there. Again, I don't make this distinction to cast a value judgment. I'm only talking about what is the intent and what is one's objective as a as an exhibitor and as a participant. So it was very crowded, but the energy is very. It was just they were open and ready to discover. That was the attitude throughout the entire place. There were people who walk by, look at your table, and just walk away, right? There's nothing here for me. But there's more people who are like, they literally will walk up and say, tell me about this. They say, tell me about this, right? Like they're ready for the sales pitch, and they're open to it, right? And so, yeah, they have their focus is very narrow and very clear. We are the event for independent comics people who read independent comics and people who make independent comics. So that wound up being great for me and Ann because we actually sold a lot of comics at this show and had a lot of really wonderful conversations with people about comics.
That's pretty impressive. That reminds me of like any kind of good marketplace where it sort of is trying to create this flattening connection between groups that aren't connected that have like a well met need and interests, and that sounds pretty great. And so, were you at a physical table in this?
Yes.
Or, okay.
And I were at a table in the I forget what room it was called, but it was in the lower level. Oh, and another nice thing that they did at Mice that I really appreciated is they put yellow balloons. They hung put helium balloons, tied them to the table if you had kid-friendly stuff. So all the kid-friendly tables were clearly marked with a very recognizable, visible from a distance symbol. Yeah, I totally need to steal this idea for a 2CAF, like for specific themes of books, right? Like, oh, these are teen books, these are kids books, something like that. Anyway, so Troy, Shadowing Tronics is in the chat. in saying that Terrificon does a lot with comics, but I think they're more of a pop culture event. That's true, as I was saying earlier. But I will say, we sold pretty okay at Terrificon. We didn't sell poorly. It's just that there were longer stretches of time where we didn't have much interaction from the crowd because a lot of the crowd that was going by was there on their way to someplace else. Right? They're on their way to get movie star autographs, or they're on their way to get toys. But then when people did interact with us, they were very excited about what they were finding there. So, like, yeah, like Rockets got a lot of really good attention from the people who were actually there to read comics. But at a show with a clear and narrow focus like Mice, you get a lot more of that over a regular interval, right?
Tell me about there's let's see, convention organizers seem to be part of a really positive trend of trying to bring together more variety of groups and get greater representation across different interests and lifestyles and topics and whatnot. And how is Mice? They sound super inclusive, but like,
yes, they are.
what does that
They
look
are,
like?
and I can only give you anecdotal, like my observation, only having walked the floor once because it was so busy that it was really hard to get away from my table. Again, good problem to have, right? But conversely, it's like, I really wanted to like walk and see like what the whole show looked like, and I only got to see parts of it. And there were people I didn't get to say hi to, but from what I saw, it seemed like a very inclusive event. And then to further telegraph that intent, we got these kits when you get there. You get your badge, you get this folder with like helpful information about being at the show. Here's where the break rooms are. Here's what the volunteers are wearing, so you know who to look for. And then next to your badge was a series of stickers with preferred pronouns, right? He, him, she, her, they, them. Which you could put next to there's a space to put that next to your name on your badge, so that there's no guesswork on this, right? Yeah, and they were very clear in their no harassment policy, and they had an inclusivity statement not only on their website but in the packet that we got as well. So they were very, very explicit and very clear about what kind of what the tone of the event is in that regard. And I think that their attention to that kind of thing is what helps generate this very buoyant atmosphere. Like, I emailed the organizers just today and I said, like, I've never been to a show like this. I mean, like, CXC, Cartoon Crossroads Columbus, oh, that was a show I went to, I didn't table though, is easily one of my favorite shows of all time. SPX, great show. TCAF, great show. Of all of these different ones, Mice had, I would say, the highest percentage of very friendly, outgoing, warm, open people that I've ever been around. Like, everybody tabling at the show was like that, and all the people who were stopping by the table. And I have to think that is partially because of their attention to making people feel like they belong and that they're welcome. Building on that.
It reminds me a lot of the articles and research based on psychological safety. And that's not exactly the same thing, but in an environment where people feel safe and comfortable, you will see a lot more exchange of conversation and ideas and participation. And this sounds like it was, Mice has that in abundance.
Very much so. Very much so. They have done a really, really good job with that. And then on top of it, they advocate for the artists and the exhibitors there, in that they have a bunch of little things, the little features built in to not, how do I put this? To not come out and say that tabling is stressful and hard for some people, but they don't say it in so many words, but they allow pressure release valves, in the sense of there were break areas in several places throughout the hall where there were snacks and coffee and other kinds of refreshments. Bagels, fruit, some kind of like chips and things like that, and then like there's water and tea and coffee. But they also had a quiet room. They made it very clear in the kit that we got when we first got there that like if you need to just get away from people for a while, there's a room where you can just sit in silence for a bit. I was like, that's a pretty nice thing to think of, because cartooning is one of those jobs that is very, very attractive to introverted people because you sit alone for a long time at a desk. Unless you're lucky enough to work in a studio. But even then, if you're very, very introverted, that probably wouldn't be the ideal scenario for you. So being at a show like Mice, where there are so many people and there's so much, like you said, exchange between all these people, yeah, probably would be good for an introvert to be able to get out of there for a little bit. And it's nice that they had a room on the premises to go into and get away from things. But if you couldn't get away from your table, they had volunteers on a regular basis. I mean, very regularly, walking the floor with a basket full of refreshments. Like they had yogurt and milk and water and fruit and some baked goods and things. And they were literally coming to you saying, "Hey, can I get you anything? Are you okay? Right? You need something to eat." So like that was super lovely. Right, because there were times when I couldn't get away from the table, and I felt my blood sugar dropping, and like the banana was exactly what I needed in that moment. It's cool that they thought of that. So
that is cool. I mean, the kind of thoughtfulness you're describing. I mean, I think, I know I've experienced at A2CAF as well. Just really, it's a kind, inclusive, helpful, service-oriented kind of event and community. Where needs of artists are there's opportunity to be able to get up, go to a quiet space. I mean, it's in a library, but it doesn't permeate the entire library in every corner, right? And then how you happen to have it's not an accident, but there is a quiet snack room, a break room, right? And that's having that kind of availability, and with different dietary needs and all that stuff. I mean, it's super thoughtful. That's not a hallmark of all venues and events. And
no,
not to
it is not.
drag any of them out, but like you can be in a situation where like the only food available are like I don't know, like sweaty hot dogs and chips and questionable cheese, and that
well,
kind of
yeah, at those big trade shows, that is typically the food that is available to you, right? Because like that's what the building has, is they have like they're set up to do like carnival food, which I mean I loved carnival food when I was a kid. I'm not slagging it wholesale, but yes, different dietary needs, and all of that adds up to a very implicit statement of artists, you are valued here. You are people that we care about, and we want your well-being is a concern to us, right? You are not just people who paid for a table, right? And that's the vibe you can get from some other kinds of trade show events where it's like it's very contractual, very transactional in that.
Well, it's transactional, and I mean, transactions are necessary for business, but you don't have to be unkind about it or not thoughtful or less humane, right? That's optional, actually.
Right.
And it's neat to see like a nice family, big group of shows that embrace that I don't know, a kinder approach. And honestly, considering the experience,
Yeah,
that's great. One thing that I do appreciate, and this isn't like, well, I'm not a plant. I really do love A2CAF, right? And excuse me, Mr. Drost, I heard about this really
what about
cool
me?
event.
I'm just a guy from this town.
Exactly. Are you there? Yeah. No. Hey, thanks for calling on me. I was going to ask you about this really awesome event called A2CAF. Have you heard of it? No, it's so something you have in the notes is something about professional development. And then there's this the symbiotic event that's connected to A2CAF called Incubate. And like that's that's a pretty neat trend, and that's as really exciting as all these other things are to see, blossoming in the community. Like a little bit, like some amount of connection and professional development is great, because once the event gets going, you're off to the races, and who knows, there's this stream of people, and it's not a great logistical thing to where it's like literally people are there to connect with you in your work, and you're like, well, I kind of want to go see that talk. that having that tension there is tough, but then it sounds like maybe Mice had a strategy for this as well.
Yeah, they did. It was. I guess now that I think about it, was similar to what we're doing with A2CAF and the Incubate event. The Incubate event falling a day before the festivities. The logic being that all these cartoonists are coming to town anyway. We have this unusual gathering of cartoonists or people interested in communicating visually.
Is there a collective noun for that?
Oh, like a gaggle or a murder?
A WrestleFest of cartoonists?
A wrestle. There we go. That's it. Rob coined it, everybody. A WrestleFest of cartoonists coming to town. Oh, write that down. Write that down. But why not take advantage of the WrestleFest by having some programming designed to reconnect us with what excites us about this stuff in the first place, and create an extra value add for the artists coming. It's not just about selling books. It's not just about networking, but it's also about like connecting with a community and leveling up. Right. At least that's like what I perceive as part of the philosophy of Incubate. And so at Mice, they had a professional development breakfast. It was like an hour. It was like you just got up an extra hour early to come to the show. So it was like it took place actually at the event. And there was two events. One was the author of Draw Stronger, which I think we've talked about on the show before, because a good friend of mine bought me this book because they wanted me to take better care of myself. It's like self-care for cartoonists and visual artists. And so
totally forgot if we did talk about this. This sounds great.
Yeah, it's really great. It's like a whole bunch of like different stretching and self-care strategies for and ways to avoid injuring yourself while making art. Yeah.
That's awesome. Which
it's like there might be that one person out there who's like chuckling like, oh, how can you injure yourself making art? If you've ever seen somebody signing autographs with a hand brace on, right? There's repetitive stress injury. There's also like bad habits like hunching over the table, which can like do damage to your back if you do it for 25 years. So yeah, so that person, they did a presentation, but then also Gina Gagliano of Random House Graphic, I think that's the new imprint at Penguin Random House, did a presentation on how to pitch to a publisher, right? That is something that a lot of the people at the show at an Independent Comics Expo are very keenly interested in. There was a big audience to that event. So it was great. It's like you show up, you basically got like a free continental breakfast kind of thing, like bagels, like granola bars and coffee and yogurt and juice and fruit and things like that. So we got to fuel up a little bit before the day started, and then we got to absorb a lot of really great information, have some nice conversations before we ran downstairs to go to our tables. Again, another little thing. It's not little, because putting those things together is actually pretty time consuming. But it seems, in the grand scheme of things, it's an hour out of the day. But it's another hour that's saying, like, hey, cartoonists and artists, your well-being matters to us as an organization. This is like, we are concerned about the public's experience and your experience, right? So, yeah, that was good. And then, I guess to cap off my Mice experience, because I want to make sure that we take our break on time, is Ann and I led a presentation at Mice. They were gracious enough to give us a room and an hour to run our nonfiction mini comics workshop. And now as I said earlier at the top of this episode, we've been doing a lot of traveling, going to a lot of different venues, and I've been doing this long enough. This whole like school visits, library visits, like different presentation venues. I've been doing this long enough that I've got pretty loose knees, and I'm ready for just about any eventuality. We get there, find out, oh, their projector broke. Oh, their Mac can't read our thumb drive to get the presentation off of it. Oh, they don't have dry erase boards, but maybe they've got something else I can use. I can work with whatever kind of technological setup to run, my part of the workshop kind of thing. And in after the summer, Anna's gotten those same loose knees, right? It's like as you find out the different limitations of every venue. So we're ready to run things entirely on our own and make things up as we go along when we've had to. And actually, those have been some of the most fun events. There have been some really fun events where we kind of look at each other and like it turns out that being married to somebody for almost 20 years grants you a lot of nonverbal communication that you didn't know you had until you absolutely need it. So that was really fun to discover about ourselves. But we walk into this room and I gave them a materials, here's the materials I need. I gave it to them weeks ago when we were planning the program. But again, it's like you can give them the list. Doesn't mean that everything's going to necessarily be there when you get there. And not only was everything there, but they assigned us 2 volunteers to help us with like working with all the students in the room. One of whom was an accomplished cartoonist by the name of Braden Lam. Braden Lam, if you don't know, is the colorist of like almost all of Raina Telgemeier's books. He's done Adventure Time comics with his wife Shelley Paroline. This guy knows his stuff, right? He's like the real deal. And so he came up and he's like, okay, you got everything you need? Are you ready to go? I'm like, yeah. And then I expected him to go away. And he's like stood there and he's like, all right, let's get going. And he gave us an introduction. And then like after we did our presentation part and the kids are all working, he was walking the floor with us and like visiting with each and every kid to make sure everybody got some personal attention. You want to talk about organization. Like when you organize a show so well that not only like all those other things I mentioned, but the presenters, the people who are leading programs for you, have everything they need and have very qualified support staff that it's like I basically had like Ann and I had a third teacher in the room. Gosh, that's like what I told them is I said that was above and beyond preparing us for success, right? Like there was no way we could fail in that scenario. And then there was like cool synergy there too, in that a lot of the parents afterwards were like, I want my first of all, this is great when I love when parents say this to me. They go, I want my child to succeed at this. What do I need to do to help them navigate this path from like 6th grade to where you are now? I'm like, first of all, the fact that you even said that that's like 90% of what they need. Like the fact that you even think it's a path, right? And you acknowledge that it's a path and that you're ready to back them on it. Not every parent does that, but there was synergy in that. One of the partners of the event was this place called the Elliott School. The Elliott School, classes in crafts and fine arts for all ages in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And so they had a program guide right there in the room. So when people said, well, how can I keep this going? How can I keep them in more classes? And Ann and I had to say, like, I'm really sorry, we're from Ann Arbor. We can't do anything more than what we did today. I mean, we'll be hopefully back next year, but, there's nothing we can do between now and then. But then Braden was able to say, like, hey, here's this school where there's classes like this that they can sign up for. So that was a really cool bit of mutual interest being served, right?
Mm-hmm. That is, yeah. I mean, it's really well thought out, because one thing that I do think happens as a side effect, and having experienced that as well, where you teaching a workshop and then being requested, it's like, well, where else do you teach this locally? Is you get that question, and sometimes a lot of times for me the answer is well, I'm not local, and so yeah, what a neat support system that's all.
And I mean, to be fair, A2KF has the same thing, because in that we partner with the Ann Arbor Arts Center. So when events are happening there, if people say, this is wonderful, I'd love to do more of this, well, you're in the building where this stuff happens, right?
Totally. And there's organizations like Game Start and whatnot as well.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Shadowing Troy is asking, are drink and draws done by the convention, or is it something that the creators put together on their own? I've never gone. I think it depends on the convention. I know in the case of A2CAF, it's something that we, the organizers of the festival, put together. We work with our partners to get a venue, and this past year it was at the Ann Arbor Arts Center, was where the drink and draw took place. I've gone to other events where I think it's more of a let's see, at CXC it was an official event, but it was sort of sponsored or hosted by one of the special guests. So my suspicion is that the festival organizers actually put on the drink and draw and then took one of their special guests who they flew out for the festival to sort of just be there, to be sort of like the face of it. That's a guess. I'm not sure. But if you haven't gone, they're really fun, because the great thing about drink and draws at conventions is that they are sort of tailor-made to bridge the shy cartoonist into having a conversation with other people, right? Because you can put your face down and look at the paper and draw something and express yourself in your first language before you start engaging with people in your speaking language, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it leads to, it is really quite the proper MacGuffin, as far as you just get everyone next to each other, and then there are so many natural questions and things. Even if all of a sudden someone that you really look up to plops down pretty darn close to you, and you're like, you know what? You're drawing, they're drawing, there's tools, there's the paper, there's the venue, there's so many topics, there's things and possibilities that you can connect with, as a topic. So
yeah, that's one of my favorite things.
Really, yeah, it's ingenious. Whoever thought of it, I don't know, but
yeah, I don't know who thought of them, but yeah, it is a really, really lovely way for cartoonists to socialize, or people who enjoy drawing. You don't even have to necessarily be a cartoonist. Troy usually goes as press and not a creator, so he's not been able to go, even if he knew that they were having one. Is that so? They wouldn't let you in? That's interesting to me.
Well, you may be just sort of out of band, or not in the loop or in the know, depending on which list you're on. So
yeah, and it also depends on the shows too, in terms of like what the flavor is. Because I've also been to drink and draws at some shows that are extremely loud affairs. Like we're talking like college party kind of level of raucousness going on, and that those ones, Ann and I are like, we're just back towards the door quietly, go someplace else, because this is a little bit too much energy for us. I want to draw cool things and have a nice talk with people about storytelling. I don't necessarily want to pour beer on my head.
Well, and the loudness is a thing too, right? Because you can be trying to chat in a loud venue is always a challenge. Like for me, it is, at least.
Oh, yeah.
You're like, draw. And I'm like, hey, I thought of a clever question. Say, have you ever thought of? And they're like, what? I was wondering if what? And it's just painful. Right. So many of those conversations.
All right, are you ready to take a break and maybe talk a little bit more about some of the why questions?
Yes, totally.
All right, so in a minute and 30 seconds, we're going to think about like what are some things we think about in 2018 about going to conventions, and what are the ways we break it down, like whether or not we want to go to this one or that one. But before we do that, we have to thank some people who make this show possible, and those people happen to be the folks who support us on Patreon. Patreon.com/leanintoart is the website. What is it? It's a way for you to give us a monthly upvote if you believe in us and if you believe in the stuff that we make. You listen to the show every week and you're like, gosh, I'm so glad these guys are doing this every week. How can I help make this more possible for them to do it every week? Well, you can do what these people did. These 5 people have been supporting us there at patreon.com/leanintoart. First up, Gale Bushman. You can find Gale on Facebook at Nightingale Art. Thank you, Gale, for believing in us. Tim F. Thank you, Tim, for supporting us on patreon.com/leanintoart. And Nate Marcel. Thank you, Nate. You can find Nate on Twitter at Great Sea Monster, just as you think you would spell it. Great Sea Monster on Twitter. Thank you, Nate. And Chris Watkins. Thank you, Chris, for believing in us and what we do. And finally, Mark Falk. Falk. You can find Mark on Twitter at Radimir, Radimere. You can join them at patreon.com/leanintoart. We will find all the shows we create, as well as the extra leans, the shows we record just for people who support us on Patreon. And those posts become an open mic where you can talk about whatever you want there in a safe place where only fellow leaners hang out. And once again, that URL is patreon.com/leanintoart. Thank you, everybody who has been supporting us there. It means a lot to us.
It really does. Thank you.
All right. What do we think about tabling in 2018? Ah, I forgot the music. Here we go. Are you ready? Here comes.
Switching it up. All right.
I know. Just in case you were starting to sag a little bit in the saddle. It's like, here we go. All right, we're back in the game.
Ready.
Things to determine whether or not we go to a show. You want to go first?
Yeah. Okay. Happy to. I think the framework this that I think of fits a lot of different decisions for business and projects. You think about why am I doing this, and what are the costs to get into to do it versus what I expect to get out of it. And what I get out of it can be a combination of experience and knowledge, practice and profit and networking, and like there's a variety of things. So but all of that, it's it's important to be thinking of the business of what you're doing. So yeah, I mean, some shows, especially if there's air travel or whatnot, yeah, cost is a biggie. And logistics, like where of course, travel, you could really end up in a expensive situation where if it's a combination of lodging and car rental, airfare, what have you. But then you've got the event as well, and then how for my primary purpose, what kind of loadout do I need to bring, which affects, like, maybe I have to pay for more luggage, or I need to ship things ahead of time. And all very doable, but then it takes more money, more time, and typically shipping ahead of time is going to save you more time or more money than just trying to pack a carry-on, because really it's pretty easy to get to, like, what's the limit or not just carry-on, but your checked luggage. It's like 50 pounds.
50 pounds.
You get to 50 pounds pretty fast.
I had a checked bag which had all of our conventions set up in it, and I had to go back and forth on it to get it down to 46 pounds. Right. There's a lot of, like,
did you have product in there too?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but I mean, it was like a lot of mini comics, so like those don't take up that much space. But
Okay.
but yeah, like display stand, and then books, mini comics. But then we had to put some of the books in my carry-on luggage because there wasn't enough room. Rather, it got too heavy. There was room in the suitcase, but it was too heavy with all the books. So we had to distribute that amongst other ways. Yes,
Happens to me every time. Yep.
and then things like, so you go to an event like SPX where the convention is held in the hotel, right? So you can stay in the hotel. It's a little bit pricier to stay in the hotel, although you can get the convention rate if you sign up in time, and then you don't have to worry about renting a car or anything because you're there, right? You can just, like, take a Uber or a shuttle from the airport to the hotel, kind of thing. But then there's other events that I went to, like ALA in Anaheim, California, and I was spoiled by Ann Arbor, which is a very geographically small area. I mean, it's like 6 square miles, right? So it's like, if you really need to, you can walk if you really need to get someplace, right? It's not that big a deal. We were in Anaheim, and we were looking at maps and stuff before we went. We're like, we don't need to rent a car. We could just walk from the hotel to the convention center, right? And then we got there. We're like, oh, scale. That's right. This is a 40-minute walk, right? Lugging convention equipment, right? So thankfully we found a shuttle, and we got a shuttle and everything. But then, like, when the shuttle wasn't running anymore, like at night or something, we were on foot, right? Unless we wanted to get a taxi or get, like, some kind of ride share thing. Which can add up, right? So now you're doing a cost-benefit analysis of, like, well, which is more expensive, renting a car and having a cheaper hotel, or having a hotel in the building where the event is happening and not renting the car, right? You make these kind of calculations when you buy a house too, right? It's like, okay, well, maybe I'm going to pay less for the house because it's farther out of town, but is that cost going to get eaten in a yearly manner in terms of paying for more gas with the commute and so on, right?
Yep.
So,
what about this display stuff, the things to present the pricing and materials themselves, like presenting your books on your table, presenting a sign or banner, whatever sort of draws attention and frames in this space that represents you and the stuff you make. How many things of that nature do you carry, and did you make them or did you buy them?
I'm gonna try to find the picture of my table set up here. There we go. I found it. I'll pull that up on the screen. I posted this to Instagram while we were at the event. So I actually bought a metal stand, a collapsible metal stand that very neatly holds almost all of my mini comics on it. As you can see it in the picture.
That's pretty
you can't
nice.
see it.
It's
Yeah.
it puts them all nice and vertical, and
Mm-hmm.
there's some overlap, but depending on your graphic design, if you're as long as you're putting the titles or in something eye catching at the near the upper region of the book, I mean, wow, yeah, you can easily identify everything in this rack. It's nice.
Yeah, and it's approximately 17 inches wide. So we made the sign at the top by just taking some 17 by 17 foam core and printing out 11 by 17 banner image, which you can see at the top there, and just sticking it on with double-sided tape, and then just sliding it behind the Rockets books on the top level. So it's a very collapsible, easily transportable setup. It's not an elaborate thing. You've seen those people who use like those modular cube stacking things that they do on their tables, right?
Oh yeah, and I mean they become. I mean they build a wire home that they dwell within at their table.
Yeah.
It's quite an architecture.
But you can get a lot of verticality out of that, which is great because it makes you very visible from a distance.
True that.
Now, at a show like Mice, though, where it's very small and cozy, I didn't feel like that was it wasn't necessary for my table. Like if we were in a big trade show floor, more big verticality, like something you see at a lot of like big trade show Comic Cons is the artist who has like literally a 14 or 15-foot wall behind them with a whole bunch of drawings that they've done, usually of prints of famous characters, because it's very eye-catching. You can see it from a distance, but that's in a space where that 15-foot wall doesn't feel overpowering because the ceiling is 40 feet, right? If you're in a little art college, that was why Anna and I didn't bring a banner. We didn't bring like a banner to put behind us because we felt like it would be, because we have one, but it would be overkill, I think, in that environment. But when we do shows like ALA, which is held in a big trade show building, yeah, we bring that banner. It's like 9 feet tall or something like that.
Nice. I mentioned banners too because I wanted to share something I learned, because I've had the different kinds of collapsible banner stands, right? But in recent years, I built one out of, what is it? It's not 1 inch. It's like ½ inch or so PVC pipe, somewhere in there, 3/4 inch. I'm not sure the exact measurement, but it's not the big PVC pipe. But it's still, as you use it, sort of like Tinker Toys, Lincoln Log, whatever, the weight adds up. And my design, pretty simple, but it probably gives me like 8 feet of verticality, plus like 3 feet wide, but in 2 sections. So I can do like 6 feet behind me with two, and I divide it up between 2 different banners, one for Guitar Fredder, one for This Panda Needs You. And so what happens is, like, if I'm traveling, that's fine if I'm at a local, event, typically like a gaming, video game convention. But that's not so great to travel with. That thing alone eats up quite a bit of the poundage as far as my carry-on. But if I essentially bring half of it, it's not so bad. But honestly, I still think it's too heavy. So
Yeah,
I need to
those
figure something
things
else out.
Yeah, those things add a lot of weight really fast.
Yeah.
Dan and I got a banner for Amazon Academy when we went to Terrificon, which was one of those ones that is like what would you call it? It's the kind where it's like a little metal box that you just like pull the banner out of and then like hook it onto, like there's a stick behind it and you hook it on the top. I forget what you would call that.
I know it's like a banner stand, but it's like a rollout something like that, roll up.
You see them used a lot. It seems to be a very popular model because it does travel very well, but it's still pretty heavy. It's got this metal case that everything goes into at the end. And the big one that Anna and I use for bigger trade shows is very large, and it doesn't have the metal case to go into, but it still has this big tripod system that is fairly bulky and heavy to travel with. I mean, the case that it goes into is at least 5 foot long, maybe 4 foot long, but the thing weighs probably about, like, I would say like 5 pounds, right? And when 5 pounds, like I was saying, like I had a 46-pound suitcase that I was checking, that 5 pounds would have put me over, and I would have had to pay for extra luggage, right?
Yeah, that's good. I mean, that's over 10% of your space or your weight.
Yeah.
Then, I mean, so other things I think of too is that, like I mentioned, like 2 video games. Yes, I do have a mini comic that I finished this year, but it's been a while since I had a new mini comic, and like that, like the type of event and what I have to offer that event, it factors in as well, and because like a comic convention and having video games, because I typically will use like a clamp, let's see, a little table arm that mounts in sort of like a screw C clamp to the table that then has a tablet able to reach different heights, right? So little ones and then or parents or whatever, and I'm very self-conscious of it, to be honest, because it's such a different thing than when, like, if I'm tabling in an artist alley where there are not that many other electronic media even, right? And because just the nature and being aware, concerned about the experience of, well, I mean, honestly, my fellow, like the folks who are tabling at the event, and also parents and kids, because they go by and they see that tablet. And if you're at a video game convention, well, of course there's a screen with something animated and almost always able to be interacted with, right? But yeah, it's a powerful device, and I like to be sensitive to that. And so I'm constantly trying to adjust when I'm at an event, thinking about having it out or not. And then also, like, am I aiming high toward parents, or am I, having it low, whichever. And I tend to just vary it. And then, of course, that's if I'm at the event. But beforehand, I have to sort of come up with, like, what's my feeling about the how well does this fit? Because it's kind of like I'm showing up at a camping event bringing a bunch of handheld video games or whatever, metaphorically.
Although, I mean, this is kind
Not
of
always welcome.
A side point, but I have noticed that there are more artists who are leaving iPads on their tables to show, like, either a trailer for their comic, or have like an online portfolio, or have some kind of like email sign up thing at their tables. I have noticed that is something that is a lot more prevalent. But I get what you're saying, though, is that you're talking about, like, having a demo of a game playing, which little kid walking by is like, what iPad game? This is like 90% of my life experience right now, right?
It is extremely eye-catching. It gets extremely high conversion as far as people don't walk by my table. They're like,
right.
Wow, I'm standing here and my kid's super into it. And I have sometimes it's nonverbal, sometimes it's verbal, this exchange with the parent, where I'm like, it's sometimes it's like this little dread gesture, and I'm like, like a little hand gesture where I'm like, hey, is this okay? Open hands, questioning, and and I'll, and it's almost always worked out where it's like, oh yeah, it's fine, or whatever. But then once, like a couple of times, I've been like, oh, you know what? That was just used. There was a kid with a sandwich. I need to clean this off. I'm sorry. Hold on. And then while I'm cleaning my screen, then they can move on. But anyway.
But you're pointing to another friction point, is that, like, what is, how do I navigate this? The events have different audiences that they are servicing, right? So, like, when we talked about Terrificon, they had they're using 3 different kinds of things to service a specific kind of participant in that. Are you a person who likes comics? You like pop culture? You like toys? We have all three of those things here for you. Mice is like, do you like discovering comics that you wouldn't necessarily find at a Barnes and Noble, right? Comics that you may not have heard of because they aren't necessarily super famous yet, but maybe there's some like new, fresh voices. You know, like are you into the novelty of the reading experience as much as the medium itself? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I'm applying my interpretation of this. I don't know if this is what Mice was shooting for or if they've ever had this discussion internally. I wasn't there. I'm not trying to speak for them. I'm just giving my interpretation of what I saw and what my experience was there. And then looking at the kinds of people that go, right? So it's like when I was, and this is something I was kind of talking about with a buddy of mine recently, where it's like when I went to Terrificon, a lot of the guests, the cartooning guests, were people who worked on a lot of comics that were influential to me as a young person. So like Larry Hama, who wrote like every issue of G.I. Joe. Oh my gosh, why am I blanking on his name? Jerry Ordway, who was one of the artists of Crisis on Infinite Earths, the comic series that like sort of, you know, I point to a lot, saying like that was what started it for me. Like I was 11 years old and that gripped me. You know, they were all guys of that generation at the show. And then so I was like the young punk. Dan Mishkin was going around introducing me to his buddies, you know, and it's like, oh yeah, this is a guy who grew up on all of our stuff. And then I looked at the guest list or the exhibitor list at Mice, and it was a whole bunch of people younger than me, right? And so now I'm the old guy at this show, right? And very different vibe, very different feeling. SPX, CXC, all these shows have different kinds of audiences that they're serving, and as a result, the kinds of people who table at the shows have different kinds of stuff, right? So at Terrificon, having a screen printed mini comic cover wasn't necessarily a feature, right? Like, oh, that's neat, I guess, right? At Mice, it's a feature, right? Oh, you screen printed these, right? Like it's a meaningful aspect to the material. How do I abstract that out? Do the products I make, do they are they congruent with the kinds of products that are going to be there? I don't want to say they're the same, but is there any kind of commonality? Am I going to be defying expectation by putting my wares there, or am I going to be meeting or exceeding expectation? Right.
That makes a lot of sense, because if you think about the whole cycle of that event and its planning and the audience they're trying to reach out to, they've done marketing and some kind of, you know, outreach to their community, and you know who are they drawing in, and they're sending signals to them, and if you and it's not like you said, it's not like you're there to sort of just replicate and, you know, do some prescribed thing, but you kind of fit within a zone of interests, and I think some of that, I mean, you might have a feel for just from the marketing of that event, right? But some of it may be, maybe you're not totally certain, and I think it might be worth, you know, trying at those events where if it meets all sorts of other criteria, but you weren't sure about this last thing. I mean, the event curators are going to, you know, be a thoughtful part of that as well, because if they're like, yeah, I guess this, what you're doing as far as thematically or technology or whatever, you know, yeah, this fits, or it's not really for our event. You know, they let them tune that out if you're not sure but interested.
Right, and that's another thing. As somebody who still gets turned away from certain shows, certain, I made it sound like it was I had specific people in mind. I have been turned away from shows for I don't get a super clear reason necessarily. I'll just be like, oh, we're sorry we didn't have room for you this year. We're sorry that your application was denied. And because I don't have any clear data on it, I do try to think expansively in that way. Well, maybe my stuff wasn't a good fit. Maybe what I showed them wasn't a good fit for what their audience is. It's not necessarily a rejection of my art wholesale. there is such a thing as like the person who walks by my table and looks at it and says, not for me, right? That's a reasonable choice, has nothing to do with my value as a person. But then, yes, that you're leading me to another sort of decision-making point that helps the decision-making process is whether or not anybody else has recommended it to me. So I've been told for years, oh, Jerzy, you would do great at mice. You need to go to mice. I've been told by several different cartoonists who are really familiar with my work who have tabled at the show, right? You would really like it there, right? Okay, so then to close, do you want to do like some final, like leave our remaining thoughts on this for final thought?
Yeah, I think we're nearing that, right?
Yeah.
So we've done this build up, and a lot about mice, a lot about thinking about going to a show, maybe a lot like maybe mice itself, whatever. But there are many, thankfully, throughout the whole country. But framing that sort of thought process, there may be a few more like key decision elements, key criteria, or maybe intentions that we could highlight as far as like picking that like where you might want a table.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so in a minute and 30 seconds or so, we're going to come back with our final thought, some remaining criteria by which we determine whether or not we want to go to this show or that show. But before we do that, we got to thank some other people who make this show possible. Those people happen to be us, me and Rob. We make stuff, and then in the making of our stuff, we come up with these thoughts that we bring to turn into this show. And the thing that I hope you will check out that I make is a webcomic called Amazon Academy, and it's at amazonacademy.net. It's by me and my buddy Dan Mishkin, and it is a story about a private school for Amazons, where American girls and Amazons can go to school together to learn about the values and the principles of being an Amazon. And the latest page that just dropped introduces our first conflict between Theodora, our borderline mean girl, and Jenny, this mysterious character who doesn't seem to want to connect with anybody for some reason. She's very special and alone. And then we see Jordan is signing up for classes despite the fact that he is a boy. And we get to like one of my favorite lines in the comic so far, because Theodora doesn't speak English that well, and which I think is like a nice little character moment to show like she has such mistrust of these Americans who are now going to her beloved school that she it's a struggle for her to speak in their language, right? To meet them halfway, as it were. It says, "What is fine for you to say this, Penelope? But will there now be boy to live in dormitory with others, girl others?" So yes, you can read it at amazonacademy.net. Updates weekly. New page drops every Wednesday. And how many pages we got in there right now? Page 14. So there's like a little bit of a read there now if you haven't checked it out yet. amazonacademy.net. Rob, you make a game.
I do. We mentioned it earlier, and it's called This Panda Needs You. The whole situation with this, it's a game that runs on a lot of different platforms, and its initial audience was all about young ones learning pattern matching and basic skills, interacting with like touch interfaces or even mice, depending on your platform you buy it on. But the whole goal of it's a mellow puzzle game. So you have blocks to stack that, you're dealing with physics, you're dealing with colors and what things go where and shapes. And you add all that up, it starts out really easy and, solving things and whatnot. And it gets more challenging with over 50 levels. And like how it works is, you encounter essentially what the solved puzzle looks like when this little panda walks on the scene. Then Cloud swoops in, makes it all mixed up. And now, hey, it's up to you. This panda needs you to help out and put things right. So I mentioned that it's on a lot of platforms. Specifically, it's available in iTunes for iPad and iPhones. It's in Android, so as a platform as well. So that's on Google Play for Android phones and tablets, and then it actually works on desktops too. So you can get it for your Mac or Windows device at itch.io. All of it. Curious, have more questions? What are the features of this thing? Again, go to this-panda.com for lots of convenient info.
Harry is in the chat saying, my granddaughter loves it. So there we go. Kid tested.
Oh, that's
Um,
awesome. Thanks.
and if you have purchased it and you have not done this yet, a great thing you can do to help more people find it is give it a review wherever you purchased it. Or tell a friend. Just tell a friend about it. That's another easy thing to do. But let's say you're here because you like the way we think about stuff. You don't care so much about the stuff we make. That's fair enough. This show is a product we make, and we have more products like that at leaditoart.com/workshops. And that's where you can download self-contained video series at a price of your choosing, even free. You don't have to pay a single thing for it. But if you get some value out of it, a great thing you could do would be to purchase it for a friend. Then you're helping out a buddy, and you're helping out us. You're thanking us for the content that we make. If you're watching this video on YouTube right now, giving it a thumbs up helps more people find the show. Or if you're listening to it in a podcatcher like Apple Podcasts, giving it a 5-star rating there helps more people find the show as well. We thank everybody who has been doing all those things. It means a lot to us.
It really does. Thank you.
All right, final
Super
thought time.
Mm-hmm.
No music for this. We just dive right into it. What are you thinking about for final thought, Rob?
Okay, so final thought. I think about the events as far as where I'm at, as far as my comics. I make some money when I go to an event. What I tend to make more of, though, are connections and relationships, and being of service. Right. So I think about what I'm offering and how it fits in with this community. So it is a combination of tabling inherently, and also ideally performing some kind of workshop, or providing some other kind of learning experience that I guess that can be a workshop, like really simple activity, or it could be more deep. I guess that when I say workshop, it's kind of there's quite a range of what that could mean. But then providing that means, well, I'm being more of service with this community. It's thinking about how I can help. That's a biggie for me. What about you?
I've been saying for years that this is based on a quote from one of my favorite media people, Tim Street, who said that networking is not going to a party and handing out business cards. Networking is going to a party and listening very carefully to the conversations happening around you, and listening for where you can help. And when it's appropriate, step forward and offer that help. And I would say that every opportunity that's ever happened to me, that's ever presented itself to me as a cartoonist, has, to the best of my reckoning, been a result of me doing exactly that, showing up in a spirit of service, showing up at events and saying, and listening to what people are talking about. And if I have any way to help them, I offer that. And the classic example I use is A2CAF itself is a result of me doing that, in 2006, I was at a convention. I was talking with Dan Mishkin, and he mentioned that one of his dreams was to create a comics festival for kids' comics. And I didn't have a way to help immediately at that moment, but the next year I started teaching comics workshops. And then the connection happened in my brain, and then I reached out to him and said, "Hey, Dan, remember when you said this to me?" Right? Which, by the way, was like one of the pieces of advice that Gina Gagliano was giving out. By the way, Gina Gagliano does a podcast called Graphic Novels TK. It's a fabulous podcast if you're interested in pursuing the world of publishing for graphic novels, full of great information. But one of the things she said in her talk about pitching is she said, like, that's a great way to that's a great cover letter to an editor, is to tie it in with some kind of observation about something that they said, something that they're interested in, something they're excited about, or something that they've made some kind of statement about, like there being a deficit in. I remember when you said that there's like a lack of this kind of story. Well, this is a pitch that I have, right? So like it demonstrates that you're paying attention and that you're not just showing up and interrupting a conversation and thrusting your business card under somebody's face, right? Yeah. So how can I help is something I'm thinking about a lot when I'm trying to determine what shows to go to. How can I contribute something beyond just showing up?
Something to highlight in your story is that that is that how can I help perspective. It's not necessarily a short-term play, right? The whole well, how can I help, and how can I help right now? It's more of how can I help eventually, and making sense of what you're hearing and doing that kind of connection. I mean, what you described, it was basically a couple, at least somewhere between 1 to 2 year lead time between
Yep.
learning, having something interesting, filing it away, but then following up and having having it continue. I mean, that's a huge thing to point out. The how can I help? It sort of accumulates over time.
Yeah, and it requires I guess, a kind of patience, or a faith that you will find ways to help in time. I was once in a break room at a festival. Again, I don't want to drag anybody out, so I don't want to name names, where it was or when or where we were. But there were two cartoonists in the room talking, and one of them was doing the part where they were saying, like, yeah, I always wondered about this particular thing. I've never quite understood this particular thing or that particular thing. And the other cartoonist was genuinely trying to help, but they were being so urgent about it that they were literally putting their hand over the table like this in front of the other cartoonist's face and doing this with their hand to say, like, stop talking, stop talking, stop talking. I'm going to offer help to you, right? And it was offered so urgently, and so it was talking over the other person that I felt that as I watched it, I was like, ooh, this isn't going well, right? This is coming across as like there's two different kinds of energies going on here, and it's not a compatible experience. So yeah, like a little bit of a sense of patience, and you always can follow up in an email later, right? You don't have to offer the help right then and there. And something that we've been careful to develop with A2CAF is we have different ways, like different sort of tiers of getting involved and helping. Is that we have the quick draws, which are a 15-minute thing, right? Or is it half hour? It's a half hour thing. You're spending 30. It's a 30-minute ask, and you don't have to develop any workshop materials. All you have to do is show up and be ready to draw. Here's a flip chart. Take some input from the crowd, draw things, and have like a fun kind of like joyful competition with another cartoonist. You get to meet another cartoonist. You get some practice at presentation, but you're in and out in 30 minutes, and there's no prep necessary, right? And then there's like hands-on participatory workshops, right, where it's like, okay, this is something where you actually develop like a syllabus, and you're going to like come up with like a lesson plan and like something. There's going to be some kind of desired outcome. And then there's like gameful events where it's like you just do like Zach Giolongo's Iron Cartoonist, where it's like a game show / drawing competition, a little bit more formal than a quick draw, but still very improvisational and kind of playful, right? So it's like, what's your flavor? And when we invite people to lead events at A2CAF, we frame it up that way. What's your flavor? What's your speed as a presenter? What do you feel like doing? Try to make that on ramp to helping a little bit easier and clearer for people. But yeah, that's something that's worth investigating when you're thinking about a festival. Look at what their programming schedule looks like. Look at what kind of events they have going on. Look at the people coming. Even if it is just to go and table and then go to the after parties and listen to conversations. But yeah.
And if it's, if it's affordable, I mean, you can do more exploration by attending the event.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Saying that, well, I intend to be participating in this for some time to come, at least, a few years, what have you. Get more info by being there.
DXC is the nut I'm trying to crack right now. I've gone to that show every year, and I go as a participant, and I talk with as many people as possible because I'm trying to figure out how can I help. Where can I be of service to this community? Because I really believe in it. I think what they're doing is wonderful, and if all I can do is just show up and be and like just support the people who are there, like financially by participating and like purchasing things, and that's fine. Because I really believe in what they're doing, but I'm also like keenly alert for how can I, contribute to this in any way. And it's been years, it's been multiple years, and I still haven't figured it out. But I'm listening, right? I'm listening and waiting for those conversations to happen.
That is fascinating because I imagine there are a lot of potential helpful things that. I mean, if anyone who is part of that event in any way hears this, I mean,
Oh,
this is a good conversation starter.
I've talked with the organizers.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, I mean, I wasn't saying that as a way to like create like a public cry like for anybody to recommend me, because the organizers know who I am and know what I do. Like they've been to A2CAF. But it's a matter of they've already got a robust system in place. So it's more about looking like what specific way could I help with everything else that they're doing, right? When you've got Jeff Smith to lead programs there, it's like, okay, you got freaking Jeff Smith to lead programs there. You don't need old Jerzy Joseph jumping in front of the camera on that one, right? But like, there may be other ways that I can help. But I was just using it as a modeling exercise to say that, again, underlining that long game is like when you see something that you believe in, I think part of that investigation requires showing up, right?
I totally understand. I mean, there are events that I attend that I know I believe in very deeply, and I think about like, how can I contribute to this and be part of it? But I so I do understand where, I mean, some events are just that well set up, and you think, I don't see where I would be able to do anything here, but how interesting. I mean, maybe that example of, let's see, what was the gentleman's name? I'm looking through my notes. Who was there to assist in your workshop?
Oh,
right?
Braden.
Braden, okay. That's interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
just being a part of the support system.
Yeah. Yeah, like literally just volunteering to help with programs.
Not that you were looking for quick answers. Not that it's quick answers are that possible. But I was like, we said something here that might have a connection. So, food for thought.
So I think it sounds like we did a podcast.
I think
Anything
so.
else?
I think that you combine this with the other 5, 6, 7 times we've talked about tabling. I feel good that I think we hit a different angle, like a different sort of qualitative look at this. Because, we've done a lot of quantitative things too. You're thinking about and it's important to keep that in mind. It is a business that you're doing. Even if you are investing in marketing, you want or not looking on an immediate return on sales or whatnot. There's still a lot to consider. So, we covered some of that here, but lots of it previously.
Yeah, and I mean it's always worth coming back to and looking at how we look at it at a later point in our lives and careers.
Certainly,
our relationship with this stuff is going to change.
Yeah, I know mine has. So you're right. This isn't our final word on tabling, and we've closed the book on tabling. No way.
Yeah.
And
we have neither have we closed the book on this podcast. So, okay, we record this show every Thursday at 10 p.m. Eastern time, 9 p.m. Central. We stream it live on YouTube and then collect it as a podcast at patreon.com/leanintoart. And, we have one more announcement to make. The next episode, I think, is going to fall on November 1st.
It certainly is. And so we've got a little bit of social network promoting to do between now and then. And starting right now, hey, Art Sound Off is coming. It's it's a thing that we do in the month of November, and this is the 5th time we've done this creative challenge.
Lord. Artsoundoff.com or leanintoart.com/artsoundoff. You can go there to read the new information when we update it in the next week to announce what we're going to be doing for this year's event. But yes, 30 days of audio journaling if you want to play along. There's also mini quests you can go on. We found ways to make it much more sustainable and manageable for people who don't necessarily have the bandwidth to check in every day. Art challenges, I think, should be a little bit flexible. And there's like a spirit.
I think so too. Especially, I mean, this is the 5th time. So if we aren't learning by changing and tweaking and iterating, like one really big one, I think is important is the optionality of it. Like, just do it privately.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it's come up in the past, but we should emphasize that. I know folks who participated in Inktober privately,
Yeah.
and yeah,
I go running, but I don't share, the data on that with the public. I don't like post to Instagram every time I go on a run because that's a self care and self improvement thing that's only for me, right? There can be things that are only for you.
exactly. And or if you do feel like doing that sharing, it can take a variety of forms. And so yeah, as you mentioned, we've got a couple of mini challenges, but then there's the big challenge as well, for putting something on out in the world all 30 days of November, posting it with a link and a hashtag. Folks can listen to it, and and we've got a lot of prompts, topics. If you're like, I'm not sure what I want to talk about, but I kind of want to talk about this, I'm going to give it a try. Yeah, we've got you covered. Go to artsoundoff.com, and lots for you to dig in there.
All right. So, as I was saying before I interrupted myself with that that very important information mention, we'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, I have been Jerzy Drozd of leanintoart.com and Jerzy Drozd on Instagram.
And I've been Rob Stenzinger, also of leanintoart.com, and Rob Stenzinger, also on Instagram.
Okay, bye.
Show notes for this episode can be found at leanintoart.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at the user leanintoart, and you can reach us via email at leanintoart@gmail.com. And remember, leaners aren't wieners. Thanks for listening.
All right, I'm going to shut off the stream. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.